Welcome back to the Dark Reading News Desk here at Black Hat USA. Terry Sweeney here with Dark Reading, and joining me now is Brendan O'Connor, CEO and co-founder of AppOmni. Brendan, welcome back to News Desk.
Thanks for having me. Great to be back.
Good to see you again. We are talking SaaS security. It's battling a number of different excesses: entitlement inflation, over-provisioned accounts, elevated privileges. This sounds like trouble already. How are security and IT teams able to understand the underlying risk associated with each user in their environment? Are we that granular yet, or is it much more of a crude instrument?
I would say the current state of identity and access management in SaaS is most organizations are confidently incorrect. So we did a survey last year, and 71%, we surveyed over 650 CISOs and security practitioners across multiple regions. 71% of them said last year that they felt pretty confident about their SaaS security. Well, last year was the year of the SaaS breach. I mean, just check the news. At the end of the year, 79% of respondents actually suffered a SaaS breach that resulted in data exposure. So going into the year, over 70% of people thought they were okay. Coming out of the year, almost 80% of them actually suffered the breach. So confidently incorrect is the term that I would use.
So how do we begin to address this sort of overprivileged set of users, which basically sounds like everyone?
You know, the challenge is security teams usually are not looking at the SaaS platform themselves. They're not actually looking at how things are set up because the line of business runs them. You know, the person who administers a Salesforce is probably different than the team that owns Workday, and that's different than the people that are doing GitHub. So you have all these islands throughout the enterprise, and everyone thinks that there's someone centrally managing it. No one is centrally managing it. And when you actually look at the GitHub entitlements or the Salesforce entitlements or the Workday entitlements, you find out that massive over-provisioning, or it's not at all what we expected, because the changes are happening in that system. They're not happening in Active Directory or Okta or whatever you're using for IAM. They're happening in that system. So it's kind of like pushing out a policy to your endpoints. If the endpoints don't hear you, they're not going to get the policy and they're not going to pick it up. So there's this mistaken notion that, you know, SaaS is listening. It's not.
Yeah, okay. Brendan, one of the other points you've recently made is that threat actors are going after user identities. Walk us through how hackers target user identities and why someone's identity might be so valuable beyond the obvious.
So SaaS is the new East-West movement. You know, for the longest time, we have had security controls that look at East-West movement within our networks and our user activity, because when people start behaving anonymously or anomalously and attacking other machines and starting to interrogate other machines, like that is a clear sign that there's something going on there and that you may have a breach or that you are breached. That activity is happening in SaaS right now and people aren't looking at it. So we typically find that MFA is optional in SaaS environments. So it's optional in that it's turned on, and if you try and strongly authenticate, you can, and it works great. But if you do a single username and password and you hit that SaaS cloud directly from the public internet, it will also let you in. So 2FA and strong authentication, it's turned on, but it's not mandatory, it's optional. And so you can take one of these identities, and from that, you can move to many different SaaS clouds, exfiltrate data, or move data SaaS to SaaS, and there's no visibility. So it is the new East-West movement.
Talk a little bit about the identity spoofing that's taken place, certainly with AI and with other technologies. Is that same MO making its way into the SaaS world?
It is, but I'm going to say it's worse. So when you look at the breaches that we saw last year, it was SaaS infrastructure. It was things like Heroku and Travis CI and Circle CI, MailChimp. It's all of these back-end SaaS systems that are infrastructure. So they have these machine identities, or they're running as a very high privileged user. So if you can get that user's identity or their OAuth token or their API key, you walk past username and password, you walk past IP restrictions. These are like golden keys that just let you into the SaaS kingdom. And people don't understand how many of these have been handed out because they're looking at their centralized directory, not what identities are populated in the system. And again, it comes back to confidently incorrect. What they think is happening and what's actually live and operating in that system are entirely different.
So let's say that I'm a CISO who has just implemented multi-factor authentication with my identity provider. I've got zero trust. Gosh, isn't that enough?
I mean, there's a 70% chance I'm going to walk past your 2FA like it's not even there. And again, because it's optional. It's not that the 2FA doesn't work. It's not that the strong authentication doesn't work. The normal employee workflow is going to be going to the identity provider, strongly authenticating, connecting via single sign-on. That's what your typical user is going to do.
Yeah.
They're not trying to break the rules, but if you can compromise one of those identities, you find out very quickly the 2FA is optional. And skilled attackers are just pillaging these cloud environments, and the SaaS clouds have all the activities, just no one's looking.
Yeah. Okay. AppOmni also just released the latest findings from the State of SaaS Security Barometer. These are always just welcome sort of data bits from the front lines. Talk to us about the cyber risk landscape and how it's misunderstood, especially when it comes to SaaS.
You know, I think the past 12 months have been really painful for a lot of organizations. You know, going back to that statistic that 79% of respondents actually suffered a SaaS breach that resulted in data loss last year. And you know, if you look at just the news, the types of apps that are getting breached, it's SaaS clouds, it's SaaS applications, it's critical infrastructure, and very skilled attackers are going after them. So what we have found is going into next year, SaaS security is a top 3 priority for almost 3 out of 4 people that responded. So when we ask CISOs and security practitioners, where is SaaS security on your priority list going into next year, we're finding it is a top 3 priority for practically everyone. And it makes sense. We spent $500 billion in cloud last year as an industry. So worldwide cloud spend last year, $500 billion. Over half of that was SaaS applications and SaaS infra. SaaS is actually the #1 way businesses consume cloud. It's bigger than IaaS or PaaS, almost both of those markets combined. So it's your core part of your perimeter, a core part of your infrastructure, and it's just being ignored. So I think the attackers have woken the world up to how vulnerable they truly are, and it's becoming a priority, but it can't happen soon enough.
It's a little astonishing to hear these figures and wonder, like, is anybody minding the SaaS store? Is it just an afterthought? Is it because it's so distributed, the responsibility, et cetera, around organizations?
It's a few things. You know, part of it is the applications are very unalike. So like GitHub and DocuSign couldn't be more different. They're 2 entirely different applications for entirely different purposes.
Okay.
But if I can get all of your contracts and private information in DocuSign, or all of your source code from GitHub or GitLab, that's a problem. But the challenge is the owner of these SaaS applications is different, and security doesn't have interfaces to them. The HR team runs Workday. You know, the finance organization runs NetSuite or Oracle or SAP Financials. These are different business units. The sales team uses Salesforce. And so the security team now has many touch points and relationships they don't have, and systems they don't have access to.
So it feels like you're maybe talking a little bit about the shared responsibilities. I wanted to ask you about that.
Absolutely.
How do you delineate shared responsibilities across IaaS, PaaS, SaaS? Why is it applicable to understand roles and responsibilities for SaaS security? I think we may have just addressed this.
Yeah, you know, I think that most people are overcomplicating the issue. And to me, it's very, very simple. SaaS is an endpoint. It is an endpoint. It's an operating system. It can download arbitrary apps. It's got app stores where you can point, click, and run third-party code locally within that runtime. You can write your own custom code in scripts and workflow. You can issue API keys. You can do all kinds of things that, just like you could do in an operating system. So think about how you manage your endpoints today. Apply that exact same thinking to SaaS. Do we know what the configuration is? Is encryption enabled? Do we have the right password policies and authentication? What are the users doing on that operating system? What third-party apps are running? What are they calling out to? What data are they moving across my network? Again, it's just like endpoints. The endpoint is now in the cloud, though. So I think that it's more simple than people would like to make it. We're overcomplicating the issue.
All right. Brendan, real briefly, any other surprises from your Future of SaaS Security report?
I mean, I think there's a lot of surprises, but part of it is, it not only told us what we thought, it was a stronger response than we expected. When we saw that, you know, really 3 out of 4 respondents said this is a top 3 priority for them, we expected that number to be less. When 79% of respondents said that they suffered an actual breach and data loss last year, we expected it to be, you know, over 50%, but a smaller number. So I think the numbers are pretty staggering.
Right. Well, Brendan, thanks so much for joining us on Dark Reading News Desk here at Black Hat. Always learn something when we talk about SaaS. Thanks for joining us on the news desk.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
We've been talking with Brendan O'Connor, CEO of AppOmni. This has been Terry Sweeney for the Dark Reading News Desk. Thanks for joining us for this segment.